Hey, Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
We used to be in a religion. I don't know if you remember that. Have you blocked it out completely, or do you remember some of it?
Just when I close my eyes or when I sleep.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Well, for me, the crying fits have slowed at a steady rate ever since then, so I'm pretty pleased about that. But Uncle Mark, you have some aid for those who aren't as fortunate as we are to be free from the shackles of.
That's exactly right, because the three of us, and our listeners will know this, bear no trauma or scars from our time in under Moroni's trumpet, as I like to say.
I mean, we're basically the healthiest people we know.
That's why we're podcasters.
Right.
Only healthy people are podcasters. Oh God. So anyway, I'm good. So we have some help today for our friends out there who are still not as healthy as your three uncles are, because we're amazing.
Yeah.
We're very, very lucky to have on an expert in exactly this sort of thing today. And that is Dr. Marlene Winell, who is a PhD in human development and family studies and a licensed psychologist. She's an author and the founder of the field of religious trauma syndrome, a topic that I think she has a bit more than a clinical familiarity with. So, Marlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So you share a little bit of our history in that you had some missionary activity, et cetera, in a former life.
Yeah, I spent quite a few years growing up in fundamentalist evangelical Christianity. My parents were missionaries in Hong Kong and then Taiwan. So that's where I was born, Hong Kong. Went to a missionary boarding school. Didn't really work my way out of the belief system until I was in college. So I was a very solid teenager, a real Jesus freak in Southern California for a while.
Those are the best kind. You what you want is the Jesus freak, because that makes friends with everybody.
Yeah, you must have been amazing to be around. That must have been incredible.
Well, I wasn't quite as annoying as some.
And then in college you began to have your doubts?
Yeah, well, I had a few doubts before that, so it's gradually accumulating. But in college, there were just so many areas of knowledge, information that were very eye-opening. And then I took a class about the Bible that looked at it as literature instead of the Word of God, and that was very revealing. So over a period of time, and then also just getting fed up with the church and with the patriarchy, and then meeting people that were not religious at all, not Christian, and having them be pretty decent people and not so evil or crazy as I was told.
So was it the collective tonnage of these doubts that kind of got you out, or was there tends to be some, for a lot of people, kind of like a camel's back moment where there's just they finally read a story or they listen to a pastor or something and they're like, this is not me anymore. Did you have one of those moments, or was it kind of the collective experience?
It was more of a collective, and I describe it as a combination of pushes and pulls, because the pushes being, losing faith in the Bible, so that's kind of an intellectual thing, and then things that happened in the church, like how excited everybody was that there was war in the Middle East and that was going to be signs of the end.
Wow.
And
Jesus.
Just being happy about war, that really got to me. But then the pulls were the things in the world, these people I was talking about that were perfectly fine and also had other coherent worldviews, that it wasn't true that there was no other way of thinking about life. So that's pretty attractive. And also, I was always much more interested in the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, those kinds of things, compared to the gifts of the Spirit, like speaking in tongues or healing or prophecy, all that stuff that was really popular in Christian circles.
You did speak in tongues at some points, right?
Yeah. But the fruits of the Spirit, like what kind of a person are you becoming, and what kind of character do you have, and are you contributing anything to the world? That was always much more important to me. And I met people that were not religious at all who were like that.
Isn't that amazing? The first time you look around and realize, oh wait, there are people who are good people. In spite of what I was told in all my life, there are people who are genuinely good and genuinely kind who believe entirely differently than I do. Mm-hmm. So and at this point, you finally get up the gumption to examine the world from a different perspective, to maybe leave your religion. But I mean, I think I think a lot of your work now has centered not around whether or not to leave, but sort of the aftermath of what happens when a person leaves their religion. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Because I started studying psychology and became a therapist, and was much more interested in, okay, so how do you recover from that? How do you heal the damage? And what is the damage? What exactly happens to you when you are raised in that? And then how do you heal and grow after that?
Do talk about that damage, because obviously from the perspective of a believer, there is nothing that could go wrong in their religion. Like, if you're in the religion, it's all goodness and light, and there's no. I mean, what damage could possibly be done by all these people practicing all the loving and joyful practices that Jesus has given unto them?
What could possibly happen?
Yeah, what kind of damage is there is available? But it seems like there is probably a smorgasbord of things that could happen. But talk a little bit about that.
Well, a couple things are pretty direct damage, like the notion of original sin and assuming that you're basically bad and wrong at core. Does pretty terrible damage to your sense of self. And there's kind of a mind fuck here that goes on where, in order to be saved in this religion, you have to buy the whole story of how rotten you are in order to need to be saved, and then agree to this formula for how to do this, admitting that, and then accepting Jesus as your savior, and then forever being grateful.
Right.
And you still have to think that you're inadequate and you have no inner resources. Everything that you do that's good is because God is doing it through you. Wow. Right? You don't have any good inside yourself. You don't have any strength. You don't have any of your own love or compassion or courage. All of that comes from outside you, and all wisdom comes from outside you. You can't trust your own intuition. You can't trust your own thoughts.
Yeah, if a earthly parent were sending that message to their child, we would call that abuse.
It is.
Yeah. We a couple of weeks ago, Marlene, we talked about the brain chemistry of religious experience on the show. And what you're saying is exactly the same thing that as the point we were making in that episode, which is they take everything wonderful about the human experience. Mm-hmm. They claim that they invented it and basically sell it back to you. And that's kind of what you're saying with, courage and hope and love and compassion is those things that are internal to us as human beings. We are told are now being rationed out to us by, either the church or a higher being.
Well, and they also convince you that there's a big problem, and then they have the solution to the problem.
Right.
And that's why when people come out of it and they feel like they don't have any meaning in life or any purpose, one thing I say is, who told you that there was a problem with that?
Right.
Who told you needed to have this cosmic purpose in your life? You had to be part of this cosmic plan, and that everything was going to be perfect in the end. And who set it up like that? Does it really have to have that kind of purpose? Or maybe we find meaning in just the way that we live our lives. Maybe we're like the rest of the animals.
Yeah.
The birds and squirrels, they're not looking for purpose and meaning, are they?
Do you find that lack of self-worth or that assault on self-worth is across all religious experience? I mean, can there be religion without that element?
Well, some religions, like maybe Buddhism or Hinduism, are not so heavy on that. And even Christianity, we have variations, like a more liberal, progressive Christian doesn't get into all of the emphasis on sin or the death of Christ. It's not as much of a death cult, but emphasizes the life of Christ and some of the more positive teachings. And the definition of being a Christian is to be like Christ, and they're not so concerned about the afterlife or, what's going to happen to you after you die. And the other thing that's really damaging in the fundamentalist version of this is the fear. And I know for Mormons, it's the outer darkness,
right,
which is pretty horrible to contemplate. So there's this underlying fear throughout the whole system, and you have to be good enough to make it. Even if you are quote unquote saved, you still have to live up to a standard if you're going to make it, and you never know if you are.
Right.
Right. I know in Mormonism you have to be worthy, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst religion? What's the worst one? I want to know what the worst one is.
Come on, be honest, Marlene.
Yeah, let's rank them.
Nobody's listening to this anyway. Don't worry about it.
I have plenty of clients that have a hard time shaking the notion of hell. I think that's one of the worst abuses that goes on for children, because children get taught about that when they're very young and their brains are not developed. They don't have any way of processing that or defending themselves.
Yeah, that is a really messed up thing to say to a kid.
Yeah. I agree. It's terrorism, and we've also done a couple segments on hell where we talk about, in my opinion anyway, as a society, we don't discuss enough that half the people that we come across every day look at us and think it's whoever we are, look at us and think it's completely fine, that the other half of people are going to be on fire forever, and because we don't agree on some level about the date of Easter or some shit like that. And they're happy to teach that to their young children. I was afraid of the werewolf when I was, 8 years old, and we were talking about hell. I think it's absolutely horrifying that this goes on in the public sphere.
And the mind your brain stores images in a very strong emotional way in your amygdala, where you can imagine fire, right? Children can understand that.
Right.
It's worse than anything you put in words. They have this very visceral kind of feeling about it. And my challenge as a therapist, working with people decades later, still dealing with that, even though intellectually they don't believe it at all.
And that is the trick, right? We've talked about this on our show, that we have all dealt with. We're all long out of religion. We've processed much of the trauma and the weirdness that we dealt with while we were in the religion, and yet every now and then some tendril of something just sort of pops up, and it's like, well, where the hell was that? There's so many layers of this stuff just sort of integrated into our brains. It must be a real challenge to try and help people sort through it all.
There's a lot of healing and a lot of rebuilding. I mean, the other area of damage is just the stunted development. You don't. If you're taught that your own thoughts are not trustworthy and your own feelings aren't valid either, people have to learn how to recognize and understand and express their feelings. They have to learn how to think critically, how to trust themselves, to trust their own instincts. There's so much learning just in terms of personal development like that. And then there are all these knowledge areas, like if you were taught that evolution was from the devil, you have a very different view of reality. And then all these behaviors that are evil and wrong. I mean, Mormon clients I've had had to learn how to go into Starbucks and order coffee. There's just really simple little things. And then you've also been kept away from lots of aspects of popular culture. Usually there's a lot of damage sexually.
Yeah.
Because sex in general is bad and wrong.
It's like it fosters people to stay in a kind of a permanent state of pre-adolescence, right?
Yeah, and dependency too, because every time you think you need to know something, you have to go outside yourself.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point to me, is that we weren't taught independence. We were taught dependence. We weren't taught how to be fulfilled, happy people on our own. We were taught that our happiness, our fulfillment, and indeed our like safety for eternity is bestowed upon us at the whim of someone else.
We couldn't be happy without that other
It's
external.
impossible. Yeah. And so like that seems like just this huge deficit that, you know, when you finally extract yourself from the religion, you're starting back at sort of square one for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you find that the religions we're talking about specifically right now, evangelical Christianity and Mormonism, et cetera, are very patriarchal? It was bad enough for the three of us being men, but I can only imagine the damage must be, you know, more severe and fundamental for women trying to find their way out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're definitely second-class citizens in the religion. So you have to add that to your task of
Toss
starting
that
to
on
feel
the pile.
more
Yeah.
part of the human race.
So talk to us a little bit about, let's just assume, and this is a fairly safe assumption, that there's someone listening to this right now who is experiencing some of the things that we're talking about. What would you recommend they do to sort of jumpstart or aid their journey and to, you know, away from religion and toward a healthy, happy, autonomous life?
Mm-hmm. There are various tasks. One is to get more information, so you need to educate yourself, and that might be educating yourself about the religion itself, like all the things you were told not to read, like the anti-Mormon websites.
Right.
Find out about what you've been through, what you've been taught. You know, get your own information.
Right.
Emotionally, it's really critical to develop some compassion for yourself and understand that it's not your fault. It's amazing how many people will still fault themselves for having been in a religion, even though you were born into it.
Right.
Right. The religion we were assigned at birth.
Yeah.
And how long you stayed in it, or how much you actually bought in and were serious about it.
Right.
And
I think she's talking about me.
really important.
Can I ask you a quick question? Because, you know, I read the comment section, as I said, on your website, and of people you've worked with and have gone to some of your seminars and stuff. And it reads just like our emails. And the question that I think we get the most frequently, that I really struggle to figure out how to answer for people, because, you know, I'm an art school dropout and you're a psychologist, is specializing in the field, is community. Is people, they've come out of a high stakes situation where, as terrible as it might have been, community was built in and they were always part of it, and they're part of something. And now that's all gone. And I don't really have great answers for them about building community after faith.
Yeah, and that's one of the illusions in the faith too, because the community thing is so strong. That also makes the religion feel true.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Because if that many people believe it and are working together and spending time together, reaffirming the same ideas every week, then it feels true.
Totally.
And it's hard to get that feeling in any other environment. So one thing to know is that the church community is like a package deal. It's a one-stop shop.
Right.
You get your meaning in life, you get your friends, you get to share values, you get to do activities. It's the same place that you go for all these things. And so in the real world, people go different places.
Right.
And when you kind of do that, it helps, because you can find out that you can have friendships in various ways. You can join other groups that are doing some of the things that you like to do, or you start thinking about all the things that you got at church, and you divide them up into different areas, and you it's okay to go different places for different things. It's more of a mosaic. There isn't any one-stop shop, and people in the world don't expect it to be like that.
Yeah, so it may be an unrealistic expectation that like you say, it was an all-inclusive sort of sensibility that doesn't exist in the real world in the same way. Mm-hmm. Right.
That is a really interesting perspective.
I've worked with people who they don't know how to make friends because the friends were in the church and were given to them. And as children, they weren't even allowed to have friends that were outside the church.
Right.
So just getting to know people, making new friendships is this whole skill set that they have to work on.
And that's part of whole recovering idea. The whole idea of recovering from your religious indoctrination is that, your life was ordered a very specific way, and so you were denied you weren't given the opportunity to learn a bunch of life skills, like you say, that we humans kind of need.
Well, the expectation is that you're never going to leave that environment, so you don't need those skills.
Right. It's hard to know if religion, designed it this way or it evolved. But there are so many things that are designed like that to keep you from, if you learn those skills, like you said, you took a class about the Bible that looked at it as literature. You're never supposed to do that because once you start opening those doors, you go. So the religion's built a bunch of defense mechanisms within itself to prevent people from becoming fully functional, self-worthy individuals because no one wants religion when they have their own self-worth.
And a lot of religious groups don't want you to go to college at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you're Mormon, you can go to their college, but good luck with that. Yeah. So let me ask you real quick, Marlene, about you're not just a therapist that's hung out a shingle. You're actually doing other stuff, some activism and some seminars and that sort of stuff out in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about where people could look for those and what those are about? You
mean the various ways of getting some support?
Yeah, and I think you have Journey Free that you conduct.
Go to journeyfree.org. You'll see some of the things that we're doing. One, in terms of building community, I just got off of a 2-hour video conference call with this group that we have that meets every couple weeks, and we actually talk to each other. It's not just a forum online. And the whole goal is to support everybody in their recovery, in their personal growth. So everybody takes turns talking about how they're doing and specifically what their growing edge is, what they'd like some help with, and stays in touch. And it is like a community, and there are people from all over the country. Today we had somebody from Nigeria and somebody from London that was also on the call.
Wow.
But there's an amazing bond because everybody is dealing with some of these same areas of recovery. And a lot of them have read my book. My book is called Leaving the Fold. And there's actually a subgroup that's reading the book together and doing the exercises together. So there's that kind of sharing. I also have a 3-day retreat that I do where people physically come and we spend 3 days together and people share their stories, and that feels good because you really get it that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. And then we do all sorts of activities together that are towards healing and growth, that are more than just talking.
That sounds amazing.
So, and then also sharing ideas about how to find community. There is a real need for community on a daily basis. And we live in a culture, this is important to understand too, we live in a culture that's pretty alienating. It's not a small village where you see all your friends at the marketplace and cross paths all the time. We live in a very alienating culture. The way people's homes are built and the fences around them, and we go around in these isolation units called cars, and people work from home a lot. people get extremely isolated and lonely, even in the secular world, right?
Right.
Yep.
So you have to take it upon yourself to deal with that. And actually, this notion of self-responsibility can be a little foreign to people coming out of religion. You know, it's really your life, and you have all these choices, and it really is up to you to do things to make your life fulfilling. It's not handed to you on a silver platter, and that can be kind of uncomfortable. It's the other side of freedom. You're free now. You don't have all these restrictions, but you also have responsibility. You have to figure out your own morality. You know, you have so many things that are really on you. But if you get used to that and you accept that, it's like this existential dilemma thing where you have to accept that and then go with it and enjoy the freedom of it as well.
Well,
I love that.
I think enjoying the freedom is about as good a place for us to close this off as we can get. So
I agree. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winell, for your work in this field. It's something that is vastly needed in a acceleratedly secularizing world. And thanks for talking with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much.
Carry on the good work.
Thank you. Well,
back at you. Yeah,
if you say so.
I'd like to believe we're peers of some kind.
We're not.
We're not.
No, it's great. I mean, having you guys out there is, another way of people feeling like they're not alone and someone understands. And so super important.
Well, that's the work. We'll all carry on. Thanks so much for coming on, Dr. Winell.
All right. Thanks a lot.